We've been talking about the fact that the Biden campaign has been run very much into undoing the policies of the Trump administration. Is it enough to be the anti-Trump should we have President Biden in the White House?
It does a lot of good, Heidi, but it's not enough in terms of healing wounds or changing the Democrats' fortunes. So the president has enormous power through executive order. Biden was hoping to do it through legislation, but since they're not going to have a majority in the Senate, it looks like he, like Trump and like Obama and like Bush and Cheney before him, will do a lot of governing through executive order. And so a lot of things that Trump has done, he can reverse or stop doing. But will that satisfy people? No. They campaigned on some very big, not promises, but proposals, and they're not going to be able to get those through.
How do you bring the two sides together when it comes to the country that votes for a President Biden, I should say, and the vehement passion that we see from President Trump supporters out there? What are the policy priorities that can potentially close that chasm?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure what they are. Unfortunately, I think the two that are most likely to get commonality is suspicion of an aggressive stance towards the Chinese leadership. I think whether or not you feel that's justified, I think that that's going to be a unifying theme. And I think another unifying theme is going to be whenever we have a vaccine, trying to rally people around adjustment to the disease. There's a glimmer of hope that Senator McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate will agree to a fiscal package now that the election is over, and that also might provide some rally. But I have to admit, I'm pessimistic. None of these things, I think, heal divisions. The divisions in the U.S. are very real.
Adam, also, we have seen really divisions when it comes to understanding or dealing with global trade, multilateralism as well. And we have seen some more isolationist tendencies coming from the Trump administration. If we do get a Biden administration, can we go the other way and reverse a lot of the backtracking that's been done in those years? And how helpful would that be to the economy?
Great question, Sherry. I think the answer is yes, we can, but two big buts. So yes, the president could come in and drop a lot of the tariff threats. The president could come in and announce we're rejoining the Paris Accord, we're rejoining the WTO, or rather, we're not talking about pulling out or blowing up the WTO. They could make a big point of working multilaterally with Japan, EU, on common approaches to China and some global problems. But the two big buts are, first, that in a country that's this divided and where so much is being done by executive order by whoever happens to be president, how much can the rest of the world count on the U.S. right now? And this is why we at the Peterson Institute are pushing a project we call Rebuilding the Global Economy. It's about how we can knit it back together for everyone's benefit, and including in a way that the U.S. is willing to do but is credible. The other big but is simply that there were problems in the multilateral system because of the China-U.S. division, and that's surmountable, but it will take a lot of work.
I've read your latest research on rebuilding the global economy, and you talk about this corrosion of globalization as well. I do want to ask, though, are we seeing a backtracking of globalization, or has globalization just changed forms in the sense that a lot of the trade data, of course, doesn't track some of the movements we already see from, say, software services and the likes of other products that are not counted?
I think you're absolutely right to broaden the focus. I mean, the emphasis tends to be on trade, and not just on trade, but on goods trade, manufacturers. And that is a very small slice of global integration, of global commerce. I mean, global commerce is, as you say, it's services, it's intellectual property, it's movements of people, it's cross-border mergers, it's flows of finance, it's educational flows, it's people-to-people interaction. And this is why I invoke the image of corrosion, because it's the globalization is becoming more uneven. There are more holes in it. It doesn't mean it's not there. We've seen CPTPP go forward. We've seen various countries conclude trade deals and various efforts, including by China, to reach out and give more money to developing countries. So it's not all one picture. But what has happened is a very great deal of distrust is built into the system. So where you have simple technical fixes like the central banks working together in March and April, it works really well. Where you have high stakes things that require some amount of leadership and vision and trust, like distribution of vaccines, system isn't working so well. And so that's where we've got to push ahead. Globalization is a very mixed bag, but the unevenness we're having now comes from a U.S. withdrawal in the first instance.
Adam, as you mentioned, we've seen, of course, that the multilateral efforts of China really take place in this part of the world with the RCEP and other multilateral agreements, as well as the investment in developing countries, right? You go back to that Davos speech where there was a moment in time when we thought that the gap left by the US was going to be filled by China as a new kind of liberal champion. Is that opportunity still there, or do you still believe that American exceptionalism can come back?
I believe it's all to play for, to use a bad expression, but I think the choices remain for both the U.S. and the Chinese leadership, and then for countries like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Canada, the whole list, and especially the EU, what they can do to try to make the system work if it turns out that the U.S. and China aren't playing right. I mean, it's very well documented. I know Bloomberg, you guys and colleagues at Bloomberg have covered this. You know, China isn't making a lot of friends right now. In some ways, it's behaving well, but in a lot of ways, it's really angering people. I mean, I had warned Chinese officials back in 2014, I think, that the Belt and Road Initiative could backfire on them, just like the U.S. it did in Latin America, or the UK empire did, as a colleague of mine, Robert Lawrence, wrote about. Because people don't like being bossed around. You know, and we're seeing backlash on a lot of Chinese money already. Seeing Australia, of course, right now is incredibly at odds with China, Canada. You know, so nobody's covering themselves with glory right now. And so it's all to play for. So who steps up could make a difference.
Adam, just quickly before we let you go, we have to talk about the minor story of what it seems this huge day, whether it's the FOMC or the BOE, your key takeaways.
On the FOMC, I think the Fed is not out of ammo if something goes wrong, but they're out of ammo for promoting the recovery. And that's why the emphasis from Jay Powell and others has been for fiscal policy. So I think I would expect the Fed to be largely sitting on the sidelines steady as she goes from here. The BOE is a different matter. The Bank of England did announce bigger than expected quantitative easing increase today for an extended period, but they're still not figuring in how bad Brexit's going to be. So I expect a move to negative rates at the February meeting.